You'd think that men would have a decent handle on how their own bodies work, and for the majority of human history, you'd be wrong. In fact, to this day, we're continuing to learn things about the male body that blow our preconceptions out of the water. All right, folks, get it out of your systems now.
Balls, 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 balls.
There's a reason the male body is designed with the testes outside of the abdomen. Sperm production goes down as heat goes up. Letting the male gonads hang out actually keeps them 4 to 6 degrees cooler. Given that, doesn't it seem reasonable that tight underwear would counteract nature's cooling system, pressing the family jewels against the body the way they do? Well, some research has supported this concept, like one study that found higher sperm counts in men who wore boxers compared to other underwear types. Countless boxers or briefs headlines later, switching to the former has become easily followed advice for men looking to tilt the odds of conception in their favor. However, a closer look sheds doubt on the idea. According to a study published in Human Reproduction, the lower sperm counts found among the non-boxer wearers were still within healthy levels. And another study published in Andrology found underwear made no significant difference in sperm count, nor the time it took for a couple to get pregnant. Stressing over underpants may just be a waste of energy. According to Jermaine Lewis, one of the authors of that study, couples are already stressed out enough when they're trying for a pregnancy. To some thinkers in the ancient world, the way to explain the physical differences between men and women was to argue that female genitalia were an inside-out version of male genitalia. As described by historian Thomas Lacour in his book, Making Sex, Body and Gender from the Greeks to Freud, this so-called one-sex model considered the male body to be the perfected human form, and the female body a lesser version. On the plus side, this did support the idea that men and women experience similar sexual desire and pleasure since they essentially have the same sex organs. In contrast to that is the two-sex model, which holds that male and female sex organs are not different versions of the same thing, but are in fact fundamentally different. This may sound to contemporary ears like a more reasonable take, but perhaps not surprisingly, it's also been used to make questionable claims about the female body, like denying that women feel sexual passion. In her book, The One-Sex Body on Trial, scholar Helen King explains that the two-sex model is an ancient conceit as well. For example, Hippocrates wrote that male and female flesh are essentially dissimilar, with women's bodies being softer and spongier. Yeah, eye roll, but don't feel too superior. Even today, science tends to define sex in binary terms, though some biologists tell us that's an oversimplification.
And he had one thing you haven't got.
What's that, sir?
A great big bushy beard.
Shaving has been the norm for men in the Western world since the days of the ancient Greeks, who felt that a clean chin brought men closer to the eternally youthful gods. According to Christopher Oldstone Moore, author of the book Of Beards and Men. Nevertheless, the trendiness of beards comes and goes. In the 19th century, the beard became a signifier of the physical and moral superiority of, you guessed it, white European ancestry, as explained by Bustle. Races that were perceived as unable to grow significant facial hair were considered deficient in other areas. According to the Philosophy of Beards, an 1854 manifesto, the absence of beard is usually a sign of physical and moral weakness.
You, sir, are extremely bald.
On the face of it, this thinking seems like a worthwhile trade-off. High testosterone levels produce a stronger sex drive, but cause a man to lose his hair at a younger than average age. It's a modern interpretation of a purported link between baldness and virility that's been around since the days of Hippocrates and Aristotle. Sadly, for the generations of bare-headed men who probably worked hard to keep the idea alive, baldness is not an indicator of elevated male hormone levels. There is a connection, though, which was first discerned scientifically in 1960, when a researcher named James B. Hamilton found that men who'd been medically castrated as boys did not show any signs of male pattern baldness, while a group of other men the same age did. This seemed to suggest that testosterone is the culprit for hair loss in men. But it turns out that the amount of testosterone doesn't matter. Some men have genes that make their hair follicles sensitive to testosterone in any amount. Understanding how that works may one day lead to a way to reverse hair loss. If you were a dude, especially an upper-class one, living in Egypt during the age of pharaohs, you wouldn't dream of leaving the house without fixing your face. For the men of Egypt, it was only natural to adorn their body with oils, fragrances, cosmetics, and other treatments, according to Roberta Shaw, author of They Walked in Beauty. Some of this was a practical concern. A treatment of oils or animal fats would offer protection from the harsh Egyptian sun. Laborers counted on massage oil to moisturize their skin and soothe their tired muscles. In at least one case, when workers weren't supplied with the oil they'd been promised, they went on strike. Lotions might be scented. Other times, Egyptians might place dried fat on their head, which, as it melted in the heat, released fragrances of flowers and spices. According to Eternal Egypt author Doug Stewart, dark eye makeup helped protect the eyes from bright sunlight and flies, but was also a fashion statement that recalled the face of the sun god Horus. Upper-class men also tended to shave their heads or keep their hair short, and they wore wigs of human hair as a way of showing their power over others. Priests removed all of their body hair, including their eyebrows. As years and years worth of generally cringe-inducing stand-up comedy routines would testify, men and women often behave differently. But are those differences hardwired? Are the male brain and the female brain structured differently? Almost definitely not. According to a review of brain studies by researchers Lise Elliott, Adnan Ahmed, Hiba Khan, and Julie Patel, in adults, male brains average about 11% larger than female brains, the researchers confirmed. But this corresponds to the larger size of the average male body. In fact, the size difference is even bigger for other organs. For example, men have 23% bigger lungs than women. Bigger bodies need bigger brains to run them. Furthermore, they say the size difference accounts for structural differences that have been reported, since not all parts of the brain scale up at the same proportion. There's no such thing as a male brain or female brain because any differences are trivial. Writing in Nature, study author and neuroscientist Lise Elliott notes that this type of research has a long history of neurosexism. That is, a bias towards seeking brain differences between the sexes and exaggerating or misinterpreting data to fit the his brain, her brain narrative. The life of a Roman gladiator wasn't easy or long. Most of these arena fighters didn't live past their mid-20s. And even though combat wasn't always to the death, about 1 in 5 to 10 matches ended with at least one fatality, according to history. Even after death, a gladiator might find himself exploited. The blood, as well as the liver of a slain gladiator, was believed to be a cure for epilepsy.
And I will have my vengeance, in this life or the next.
Gladiatorial games began as funeral rites, and the supposed healing properties of a warrior's blood may have been a part of that tradition, explained a report published in the Journal of the History of the Neurosciences. The idea behind it was the magical thinking that consuming part of a gladiator's body transferred some of the healthful energy that's leaving the dying man. As explained in Quackery, a brief history of the worst ways to cure everything by Lydia King. Since epilepsy comes and goes, it may have seemed that the gruesome remedies sometimes work, perpetuating the belief. After gladiatorial combat itself died out, the blood of executed criminals was used for a similar remedy. It was part of a wider practice called corpse medicine, the use of human body parts for medical cures. Sigmund Freud is a complex, even controversial, figure in the history of psychology. On the one hand, many of his ideas were groundbreaking, such as the concept of talk therapy, or the idea that the unconscious part of the mind can influence our behavior. And on the other hand, he tended not to subject his theories to any kind of scientific rigor.
Nah, just got a minor Oedipal complex.
Perhaps the most famous of his concepts is the Oedipus complex, which states that boys view their father as competition for the attention of their mother. One of the effects of this is castration anxiety. That is, when a boy becomes aware of the physical differences between men and women, he assumes that his mother's penis has been removed, and that his father will do the same to him. This anxiety leads to the development of a sense of morality, what Freud called the superego, a kind of inner father that ensures proper behavior, And the theory gets even less, let's say, credible than that. Writing for Psychology Today, journalist Rebecca Coffey explained that, according to Freud, since only men grow up with this fear, only men develop a moral sense. Women, he concluded, are innately amoral and require the guidance of a father or husband. He should have known better. Freud's daughter Anna, who was his closest intellectual companion and an influential psychoanalyst herself, was a lesbian who stayed in a happy, monogamous relationship for 54 years. Everyone's heard this one at some point in their lives, and really, it's a belief that could apply to anybody. But let's look at it through the male lens. One survey conducted by body grooming company Backblade found that although 55% of men said they felt ashamed of their body hair, 56% agreed that men should only shave their face, and 62% said they've never shaved their back. So for any dude who'd like to manscape but is worried that their sheared pelt will grow back with a vengeance, hair does not grow back faster, thicker, or darker after it's shaved. According to the British Medical Journal, research studies have been disproving this claim since the 1920s. Hair just doesn't work that way. When it's cut or shaved, it's the dead portion of the hair shaft that gets removed, while the living follicle remains below the skin, unaffected. As for that buddy who swears it happened to him, it's probably because new hair can look darker as it hasn't yet been exposed to the elements. And stubble that's left behind can seem coarser because the fine tips of the hair have been removed. When a man cries, it's an unusual enough occurrence that people take note. But the idea that men should hold back the waterworks except in the most extreme situations is a modern concept. In previous centuries, men cried to express all sorts of emotions, including sincerity and pleasure, according to historian Tom Lutz. In his book, Crying: The Natural and Cultural History of Tears, Lutz writes that epic sagas from the ancient Greeks through the Middle Ages are full of freely weeping heroes. It could be that this belief is slowly swinging back the other way, though. A 2016 survey of 2,000 men in the UK, conducted by psychologist Donna Dawson, found that, on average, men said they'd cried in front of others 14 times in their adult lives. But they estimated that their fathers cried in front of others an average of 5 times. By the way, guys, if you're going to cry, you might be better off doing it in front of women. One study found that women were more likely to help a man if he was crying, but a crying man was less likely to be helped by another man.